There are some common rhythm patterns that for some reason students almost always get wrong, and you might be one of those, so pay attention. Your piano teacher Tim, though, has you covered because today I'm going to be showing you these patterns and how to count them correctly. Let's get on to the lesson. The first thing you need to know about are simple note durations. These are quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, dotted quarter notes, maybe eighth notes, 16th notes, things like that. If you're not familiar with all that already and how time signatures work and the whole thing, make sure you check out the link in the description because that will help you catch you up. All right, on with the meat of the lesson. The first rhythm that students commonly get wrong is the dotted quarter, and usually followed by an eighth rhythm. So we're really talking about from here to here. So let me show you how to do it. So hopefully you checked out that lesson I mentioned, or you know how to count already. So the thing is obviously we're in 4/4 time signature, meaning we have 4 beats in a measure. So the total has to add up to 4. So the thing is obviously beat 1 is going to hit there. So we need to figure out how long are we going to be holding the dotted quarter for. Well, a dotted quarter note, as you might know, gets 1.5 beats. And if you remember from when we were subdividing, let me write it over here so we can have our quarter notes, right? Okay, so if you remember with eighth notes, we had to subdivide each beat. We still had our 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, but to account for all these, missing areas, we had to come up with like kind of a placeholder. So we used the term and. It looks like a plus sign. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, we count them twice as fast, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The reason this is relevant is that each of these now represents half a beat. So there's half a beat on the number, there's another half a beat, there's another half a beat, half a beat. So just get in your mind that each of those, the 1 and the and, 2 and the and, are each worth half of a beat on their own. Now the thing is that I said the dotted quarter note is worth 1.5 beats. So the question I want to ask you is, how many halves in 1.5? Well, think about it. You have a half, so you have a half then, plus another half, which is whole, so you have 1 then, plus another half, so you have 3 halves in 1.5. So therefore your dotted quarter note, which will look like this, as you remember, is going to take up 1 and 2. So here we go. We're going to go back to our rhythm, and this is going to take up 1 and 2. Just like that. I'm going to draw a line underneath to indicate how long that's going to be held for. The next eighth note is going to be held on and, or pressed on and. And then, of course, you have 3, 4. However, I do recommend you still count out the ands. This is called subdivision. And the reason you do that, even though you're playing quarter notes, is to maintain a consistent tempo throughout. Let me show you how to play this now. So you go to your keyboard, obviously, and I'm going to count it real slow. I'm just going to be counting out the 1 and 2 and until I get to 4, or the and of 4. So here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Obviously hitting each of those beats or each of those notes where they appear on each of the numbers that I've outlined. So when you're first doing these, you actually do want to go through your music and chart out like exactly how I did, using the subdivisions, drawing the lines to indicate how long to hold them for. So this one is super common. Students get this wrong for some reason all the time, and it actually took me quite a long time to get the hang of it. So let's just do it together a couple times. Ready? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then beyond just counting it out, what I would do is I would actually start to kind of feel the rhythm in your body and start to kind of know like just the sound of it. Bum, 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 2 and 3, 4. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to be talking about several patterns that have to do with eighth notes connected to 16th notes. If you don't know already, when notes are beamed across like this, that tells you that together they're equal to 1 beat. Okay, to explain how to count these, what we're going to do is we're actually going to do kind of like what we did before with the eighth notes when I was showing you how you're splitting them up into 1 and 2 ands. things like that. So what I'm going to do is we now need to figure out, well, first I'm going to show you that we still have all 4 beats. So each of these groupings of 4 are called the 16th notes. Oh, 3 comes after 2. How about that? And then, so we have our 4 beats. We still also have our ands like before. We're just putting them in the middle there. So therefore, we need some placeholders for these guys. So let's do that. Let me show you how that works. So we do that using the term. So you have beat 1, and then you have E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and so therefore we are subdividing even further. We still have our 1 and 2 and. We have just broken them up now to be even faster. So back to the quarter notes, it would just be counted simply as 1, 2, 3, 4, and then eighth notes you play them twice as fast. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then 16th notes are 4 times as fast, or twice as fast as the eighth notes. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Takes a while to get used to, but keep in mind that like this helps you figure out some of these patterns, just like how we did with the eighth notes to the dotted quarter note that we had before. So let me show you how this works. So obviously we're going to have beat 1 here, right? Now the question is, all right, how long am I going to hold that eighth note for? Well, we need to split up the beat, because whenever you're dealing with 16th notes in any fashion, you have to be subdividing into the 1E and a 2E and a type of formula. If you only have eighth notes in the piece, you can just kind of resort to the 1 and 2 and. That's perfectly fine. Okay, so you have 1, and the eighth note now, I'm going to write up here. So this is what this is going to look like. So if I had my eighth notes in place, they would take place on 1 and. So really this eighth note here takes up 1 E, and this one is the one that takes up and a. So obviously when we move this over here, we have a single eighth note, so this is going to be taking up 1 E. This means and occurs here, and then since that's only a 16th note, our next syllable is going to be a. So we're going to be counting this as 1 E and a, just like that. All right, let me show you another pattern. Okay, so we had the eighth followed by 2 16ths, which we just did. Now we have 2 16ths followed by an eighth. So we have 16th notes, so we're splitting this up into 1 E, right? And then this time the eighth note's on the end, so this is going to get 2 of them, right? Since you need 2 of these now, 2 quarters really to equal half of a beat. So that's the opposite now. It's going to be counted as 1 E and a. The first one, I'm going to count them both back to back, is 1 E and a, and then the next one is 1 E and a, just like that. And we'll do a little practice kind of combining them all into the same measure as we go along. All right, let me show you one more combination of 8th, 16th pattern. Okay, we have a new pattern. We got a 16th here. You can always tell by the double flag, 16th here. So therefore, we have to be using our 1 E andas, right? So whenever you have a 16th note, like this first note, it's just going to take up one of the syllables. So 1, and then the next syllable has to be on that next note. It can't take up any more space than that. Now this is an 8th note. You can tell because the beam connecting across only has a single flag up top, not 2 of them like the others. So this is going to take up E and then you have a right here. So this one's going to be counted as 1 E and a. 1 E and a. And just like the dotted quarter eighth rhythm I told you before, you want to get the feeling of all these. So even without, you want to count them first, but then after a while you want to just get the feeling of it. Bum, bum, bum. 1 E and a. 1 E and a. 1 E and a. And then bum, bum, bum. Just like that. And then same thing with these. I kind of forgot to mention. This one is bum, bum, bum. Or 1 E and a. Just like that. And this one is 1 E and a. All right, now let's see how good you are. We're going to kind of combine a lot of these 8th, 16th patterns together, see if you really get it, and then we'll move on to something else. All right, let me show you. Okay, now we have a whole measure of this nonsense. Just kidding, it's not nonsense. Okay, so we got our first grouping here. And by the way, they're all beamed together. So what does this beaming mean? If they're all beamed together, that means that this equals 1 beat. You know, the next one's 2, 3, 4. So we know that we have our 4 beats there because when they beam them together, that's 1 beat. So you have beat 1 here, obviously in that first grouping. So let's just write out, where the 4 beats, sorry, will occur. So here we go. We have a 16th note right here. So this can only take up 1 out of the 4 syllables of the 1E andas. So this has to take up E, this next one. That's an 8th note right there. E and and then draw the lines if you need to make sure you know where they're hitting. And then on the second one, you have 2, but this is an 8th note. So this is going to be taking up 2E. And then you have and. This one is 3, E, because they're 16th notes. This 8th note is going to be and. And then the last one is the same as the first one. So you got 4, E, and let me just draw the little lines here. They do help me at least. And then this might be confusing at first, but it does get easier and easier. One way you can check to see whether you are correct or not is if you have all 4 syllables of each beat written out. Because if you're missing any, or you wind up at the end and you don't have enough notes left, then you know you goofed somewhere. So then you got to kind of go back and check. It is going to happen to you, especially at first. It took me quite a while to get used to this, but make sure you keep practicing it because you will see these patterns quite a lot. All right, let me count these out now. So when you're actually playing them, you want to play them nice and slow. So here we go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and So I'm pretty good at it. It might take you a couple times to count through. All right, let me show you another fundamental rhythm pattern that students often get wrong. Okay, we're doing a simple one. Now this is an 8th rest. It's the same as the 8th note, except you don't play. Makes sense? So, do we have any 16th notes in this measure? No, we do not. I don't see any double flags or anything that would look like that. So we only need to really count out the 1 and 2 ands. So what I would do is here we have an 8th rest. So it's going to take up 1. This is the other half of 1. And then 2, 3, 4. However, I would still be counting these, the ands in between. That will just make sure that you're playing them as consistently as possible. So this I would just call the 8th rest, 8th note pattern. So here we go. This is how you're going to count this nice and slow. So you're going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just to give you some feel for how that's going to go. All right, on to the next one. Okay, the next rhythm I'm going to teach you is the dotted 8th 16th rhythm. So here we have a dotted 8th note. And the first question I actually want to ask you is, are there any 16th notes in this measure? The answer is yes. You can identify that one right there. And that tells you you're going to be subdividing into the 1E and a 2E and a kind of format. So the real question is, which is kind of confusing, is how many beats in that dotted 8th note? Well, if you remember, the dot, I mentioned this actually in the other lesson I did that I told you to watch, and that the dot adds half of the note's value to itself. So here we have an 8th note, and that's worth half of a beat. And here, with the dot, we're adding half of a half, which is a quarter, which, as you remember from math, that you're going to have to convert this one to 2 over 4. So 2 over 4 plus 1 over 4. So therefore, the dotted 8th is going to get 3/4 of a beat. So when we go back to our 16th notes, where are they? They're way back here. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of this now. So now when you're doing the 1E and us, each of those now represents 1/4 of a beat. So we need 3/4 of a beat. So therefore, our dotted 8th is going to take up 1E and, since each of those represents 1/4 of a beat. So let's shift it over and apply that to what we're doing here. And here we have beat 1, obviously. And remember, I said it's going to take up one E and. This is going to be on a. So that checks out, right? Because that makes one complete beat, and those are beamed together. And then you want to count out the rest of the beats. So I just like to write the numbers first. But you still want to be counting the eandas, as I like to call them, just like that. So here we go. I'm going to play this one. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. Once again, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. If you're liking this lesson, make sure you smash that like button. It really helps me out. You need some more practice on your rhythm, of course, so you want to check out this lesson right here. And it's been your piano teacher, Tim, here. Thanks for coming by today, and I'll see you, yes you, in the next lesson.